in vain. May it not be a talk show, but it should be a program that carries the aspirations of young people of our country, a program that speaks and captures the imagination of everyone, especially those that are marginalized in our society. It should be a program that gives birth to action, a program that gives birth to solutions that change the economic and social status of all young people and young women in particular. Thank you so much, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Comrade Precious Banda from the Young Women's Desk. Because we are running short of time, comrades, we're going to call comrades of SASCO, Comrade Tabile Lamini, the Treasurer General, to come forward and give the message of support.
Greetings to the Progressive Youth Alliance, Comrade Sizo, the Program Director, Comrade Butanani, the SG of SASCO, who's co-directing, the leadership of the ANC, aligned parties, leadership of the NYDA, Women's Desk, and the Young Women's League, members of the ANC, the Progressive Youth Alliance, and everyone joining us today. My name is Tabile Jamini. I'm the Treasurer General of the South African Students' Congress. Today we are here to remember the youth of 1976 who are at the forefront of the boycott of 6 June 1976, when students across the country decided enough was enough and took to the streets from different provinces, waging a fight against systematic oppression that stood for their future, their education, equal opportunities, future, and the dreams of the youth that exist today. We commemorate and remember the lives of students who stood with their face high, facing oppression head on. The students that chanted in song, Senzeni na, but the brutal system still waged a war by firing bullets, tear gas, and live ammunition. But those students never gave up. We salute the young men and women of 1976 whose sacrifice ensured that today we can be able to have a voice, bring back the agency to young people, give us the opportunity to stand up and fight for our dreams, defend our future, and be the advocates of change. Young people continue to be the vanguard of democracy, from NUSAS, SASCO, AZASO, SANSCO, SASCO, the Progressive Youth Alliance, and other progressive youth movements that continue to champion change. Today, our fight is of economic freedom, for access and success, for land, for education, for the bridging the gap of socio-economic barriers, and the fight against oppression and the right for different bodies to exist in our society. That includes the LGBTI community, people with disabled bodies, that, as well as everyone that exists in our society. We are still fighting in the society. We are fighting femicide, we are fighting sexism, we are fighting racism, we are fighting xenophobia and transphobia, and we are fighting for a society that allows us to exist. Our parents, our grandmothers are still living in poverty. Therefore, we are still not safe. We are still frustrated. We are frustrated by the commodified education which closes doors of learning for many students. We, the young people, are still faced by the system that still puts us at the back of progress. 2016 and 2015, we took to the streets and demanded free quality education. We demanded a decolonized system of education, a curriculum that produces employers, developers, and inventors, not just employees and unemployed graduates. Young people are sitting at home with their diplomas, degrees, and their training certificate and the experience, but there's lack of opportunities. We do not want a youth of criminals. We do not want gangs in our communities. We do not want to loot in order to have. We do not want corruption. We do not want drugs and violence. And we do not want to burn down things in order to be heard. We are tired of shutting down. We are tired of having to have connections in order to have a job. We are tired of depending on government subsidies. We do not want to be remembered as the youth that celebrated a grant of 350 when the cost of living is still very expensive in South Africa. We are hard workers. We are willing and able, but we need equal opportunities. The young women of this country are tired. We are tired of fighting for protection. We are tired of being victims of abuse. We want to live. Yet every day there are cases of women being abused in South Africa that are reported. I am tired of wondering if I am next. Khomolelo Legae, an 18-year-old, didn't know she was next when she was murdered while walking home in Ramosadi village outside Makikeng. Precious Ramulana, a 21-year-old, didn't know she was next when she was found dead at Capricorn College. Uyinene Mretyana didn't know she was next when she went to fetch a package at the post office at the University of Cape Town. Alongside with the 500 cases that have been reported in the month of April and May during a lockdown, a global pandemic. We are tired of fighting. We can't breathe, and we need justice now. These stories are a harsh reminder that the societal economic marginalization of the youth in South Africa still persists. At the same time, we are facing a pandemic of COVID-19, which has posed a huge threat on education. We have had to shift the way that we live. We want to graduate. And as a South African Students' Congress, we cannot be spectators in a destructive arena of the daily pandemic. We emerge from a difficult time as students. We are still trying to ensure that no student is left behind and fighting institutions that continue defining themselves outside of the regulations of the Department of Higher Education. In general, South Africa still faces many challenges. The historical disadvantaged universities and TVET colleges in our country remain unchanged and with permanent remnants of poverty, inequality, underdevelopment, and infrastructural backlog, which is contrast to former white institutions who are able to catch up with the fourth industrial revolution. It would be a fault for us not to acknowledge and appreciate the strides made by government to relieve young people from poverty, oppression, and try to create a better society for us. We appreciate the NGOs and the NPOs, companies, government, those who are invested in youth and community development. But we need more support, entering the labor market, and we want to contribute to the economic growth of this country. The 2019 Youth Day commemoration speech of the president in Peter Mokaba Cricket Club, Polokwane, the president emphasized that they were on a mission to ensure that they provide support to grow new future jobs, working with social partners, organized labor, businesses and civil society, build jobs according to the Youth Summit and curbing the gap of unemployment in a sustainable manner. Mr. President, we will hold you accountable and your cabinet. We will hold the government accountable. We will hold each and every citizen of this country accountable. Young people, you remain resilient. We have ambitions for this country. It is ours to inherit, and we are about to take charge of our destiny. Aluta continue.
Amandla, how are you too? Thanks, comrades. As introduced, my name is Butanan, the Secretary General of SASO. Comrades, moving swiftly with our program, we are going to call COSATU young workers. Comrade, are they here? COSATU? Okay. And if they have not arrived, comrades, let's move quickly to call the young red, Ufasim, Comrade Richard Mamamulo. Please ascend. Yes.
Mandla. Thanks, comrades. On behalf of the Young Communist League, we take this opportunity to obviously reflect on some of the current challenges that as young people we are commonly facing. And as we meet in during this Alliance Youth Day commemoration program under these unique circumstances, we think obviously our way of life has equally changed. And as many South Africans will be celebrating the Youth Day tomorrow, celebrating the heroic acts of the generation of 1976, we think it's also significant for us to reflect on what they have obviously done, but as well as reflecting on the current challenges that we have and finding common ways in which we can obviously work towards improving the conditions of our young people. 26 years into our democratic breakthrough, a majority of our youth still find themselves bearing the brunt of many socio-economic challenges, confronted by troubling realities due to crime, poverty, unequal education opportunities, and unemployment and drug abuse. Our country is also marked by another regrettable recurring pandemic of gender-based violence targeted at women and children, with recent shocking incidents having been reported over the past days. I think between March and April, we've had over 5,000 reports of gender-based violence in the country. So it is quite a big concern in Gauteng, by the way, alone. So the further adverse impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the security of jobs in our nation also leaves little to be desired, as we know that the likelihood is that more of our young people who are already unemployed in fighting our present battles, we can take from their strengths and learn perseverance and dedication in defining our future. As Martin Luther King Jr. puts it, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. In recalling the importance of understanding the dynamics of exclusion and exploitation in our societies, we need unity in today's combat against any form of discrimination around the world, which should promote cooperation and collaboration among human beings. We are witnessing an insolidarity with young people across the different cities have exploded in rebellion over the ridiculous killings of George Floyd and many others who have fallen before. This revolt amidst the deadly pandemic that is also disproportionately killing African Americans suggests that the people feel the political system in the US cannot solve their problems. They have actually exposed a shocking degree of racism in the supposedly liberal North.
I like that. Okay, so what we do now? We do this. All right.
Don't forget that we collectively have a very important role to play in the revolution. We must be at the standard. We must be the standard bearers, the most vigorous champions of the revolution. We must be the loudest sector of the people, the most energetic and dynamic. We must be the best soldiers and first defenders of the revolution. As we ponder on aspects of for considering a youth-centered economy now and beyond COVID-19, it will be very important to also consider the contradictions and ideological differences for South Africa's economic direction. What should be done to realize tangible economic transformation? That is a question we need to ask ourselves. Our PYA needs to redefine the role it will play in building peaceful, sustainable societies. Long live the PYA.
Movement as the NYTT of the ANC. The movement initiated by young people throughout the country that the Youth Month should not go unnoticed. So on the eve of June 16, one of the things that young people have said that we must communicate is that we must never depoliticize June 16. It is a sound, solid background that has inspired and that continues to inspire generations of young comrades. We are commemorating June 16 in the context of COVID-19. But what is said is that femicide continues to rear its ugly head. I want to believe that femicide, we should liken it to a psychoprostate cancer of a special type. It is a psychoprostate cancer which is embedded, whose roots is patriarchy. So this psychoprostate cancer speaks directly to the conduct of men. Young people are also calling upon the president of the country to really convene in session, to convene men, young men, and talk to them. Gone are the days when there is a GBV, we only focus on the women. We have to focus on these cycles. Men, we suffer from a psychoprostate cancer of a special type that disregards our beloved ones, that undermines our children, that undermines our daughters in particular, our wives, our grandmothers, and our mothers. So we call upon the president, convene men, and as the leader of this country, to chart a way forward, because it is high time that a young man has got to be called to order. It is high time that an uncle has got to be called to order. It is high time that umalume has got to be called to order. Utatomkulu has got to be called to order. A father, utata, because this thing happens, a brother, this thing happens from our own homes in many of these instances. A lover who is a man has got to be called to order. So this is a clarion call that the president should champion this task. The young people have also taken cognizance of the fact that in the midst of this pandemic, it is young people who are at the receiving end of the job losses. The private sector is unrelating to retrench many young Black employees. The young people have also taken cognizance of the fact that it is Black private businesses that have to benefit from the stimulus packages that government has unleashed throughout the country. So we're making a plea. We're making a plea that young people have got to be the beneficiaries of business opportunities or the support that government has unleashed. And as the NYTT, we have also said we need to change the narrative about whether we talk post-COVID, or we should actually assert the narrative that actually all the pandemics have always been with us for all these years. The solution has always been the intervention that is more scientific to find the cures, to find the vaccination. Therefore, the new norm is our coexistence with the pandemic, but humanity will be at the helm of defeating this pandemic. So as we commemorate June 16, we know very well that this pandemic or COVID-19 will be with us, but humanity is hard at work to ensure that we defeat it. And on that note, comrades, would like to mobilize, to call upon all young people to be of service to the people, their communities. Call upon all young people to take care of their sisters, their mothers, their grandparents, their grandmothers. We want young people to be at the forefront of doing all this work. And we want to applaud the young people for being central to political lectures that have been all over the country. We want to applaud young people for ensuring that for more than 500,000 young people to access the political education program, because that has demystified a preconceived notion that young people have been extremely depoliticized. Thank you very much. Amanda.
Have engagements and share with us what is happening in their sectors. How do they think that the government of the ANC should be of use in the different sectors that they're in? I should just indicate that technical people are saying that we should just look at the camera. So the camera of this gadget in front of me is on the left, in the middle. On the left, in the middle. So you look at the camera I know that you'd want, obviously, there'll be those moments that you'd want to look at the audience, but let's just try to look at the camera as we go forward. So, comrades, because of time, I think we should start with our panel discussion, and we should say that we have picked up different young progressive people from different sectors of life. The reason we've done that is to make sure that we at least have a grasp of what happens
Please unmute your.
I think it's unmuted.
Yeah, she's unmuted. She's unmuted. Yeah, you're picking up. Yeah, sure.
Can start. Speak. Can start. Okay. My name is Sipogazi Duma. I am the chairperson of the interim SRC at UJAPK. And I will basically be speaking on issues that students in the higher education are facing. Okay. So the youth of 1976 fought against racism and oppression and basically for the emancipation of Black people. The youth of the Feesmas 4 generation also ensured that we enjoy the benefits of free education in the higher education system currently. So these two generations have basically anchored youth activism, and we stand on their shoulders. They've paved the way for us, and we must follow in their footsteps. The future is in our hands. That is something as young people that we are often told. Yet we have many difficulties that have ensured that us shaping the future is not a smooth process. Firstly, we have issues with youth unemployment, looking at the high rates of graduates that are unemployed. The Feesmas 4 generation made groundbreaking improvements to the system to ensure that as Black people, we are given an opportunity to go to universities and to learn. But it's unfortunate that once we've gotten these degrees and gotten these qualifications, we now face high rates of unemployment. So as students from higher learning section, we are calling for the eradication of the N+2 rule, as it is a rule that has ensured that Black students are oppressed. We go to university, yet our historical debt has ensured that we're unable to graduate, plus the N+2 rule. So that is one of the things that we are calling for the eradication of. We face many racial tensions as it stands now in institutions of higher learning. And These racial tensions have ensured that we see that majority of some graduates in sectors are predominantly white and male. We also have issues when it comes to the missing middle. The missing middle are students that are often ignored and not given as much attention as is given to NSFAS funded students. We see now with the provision of devices that the missing middle is ignored and provision is made for NSFAS funded students. So we're basically calling for the missing middle not to be ignored. Furthermore, we're calling for TVET colleges to not be ignored. Institutions of higher learning, your universities, have been put on a sort of a pedestal, and that has now led to TVETs being ignored. We see transformation when it comes to some of our issues on paper, yet action has not been taken. With the spike of the pandemic and therefore the lockdown and the country basically being in a state of national disaster, we have seen many more issues arise for students within the higher education sector. We've been thrusted into a system of e-learning without being trained, without being prepared. We find ourselves in a situation where some of our fellow students are being left behind as they have issues with data, connectivity, and lack of devices. We find that there is a big gap that has been bridged between the historically white universities and the historically Black universities, where you have universities such as WITS and UJ being able to make provision to their students for data and for devices, yet you have other institutions that are unable to do this. We now find a huge gap within the sector where there are students who are able to continue with e-learning and achieve whatever they need to achieve, and other students who are basically staying at home because of the issues that they're facing. For example, at the University of Johannesburg, we've also called for management to say that for this year, we need to do away with academic exclusions, as there are students who will be unable to connect, who will be unable to write their exams, will be unable to write their tests due to being thrusted into the e-learning system without training, due to device issues, due to connectivity issues. So those are one of the proposals that we've made to university to do away with academic exclusions, as right now students have no control of what is going on. On top of that, we've also made the call to university to encourage the department to do away with the N+2 rule, because I feel like this year we'll find a spike in people who will not be able to firstly complete the year and will be forced to come back next year. However, this rule might be detriment to them completing their studies. Besides connectivity, data, and devices issues, we find that many students are living in situations and environments that are not conducive for e-learning. The environment at home is one that does not allow for them to fully focus on their academics. And also we're finding that with the e-learning system, it's a system that has not promoted teaching and learning, but rather we find that as students, we're chasing deadlines and trying to complete tests and assignments. We're not really learning anything. So we feel that we understand that, yes, times have changed, but in order for us to fully take upon this virtual way of living, we need to ensure that the academic and the learning system is not deteriorating, that we're still learning the same way that we would if we were on campus. Another issue that as young people in the higher education sector that we've been facing is mental health issues. We're finding that because of the learning environment that students are in, because they're unable to complete their tasks and complete their tests and exams, they now find themselves falling into depression. So, and it is a well-known thing that, especially in Black families, depression and mental health issues is not something that is really considered. So we call upon government, we call upon organizations to make the call to say that mental illness and mental health are serious issues that need to be dealt with, especially for learners in the Department of Higher Education, as the amount of pressure that we face does lead to high suicide rates. Furthermore, we find that on top of the environment not being conducive, we have had a spike in gender-based violence. And this is also something that affects young people that belong to the Department of Higher Education, because yet again, they find themselves in environments where there is abuse present in their households and they're unable to study, they're unable to work. So we're calling on the Department of Higher Education to reconsider the 33% rule, or as we go on, ensure that more students, especially those that have special needs, and especially those that are in environments that are not conducive for learning, are allowed back to their residences where they'll be safer, and are allowed back to campuses so that the normal teaching and learning can continue. Um, so while yesterday I had a conversation with the the convener of the Young Women's Desk, and we're just speaking about how gender-based violence really affects young women in this country, and women within in the higher education sector are not excluded from this. So one thing that we are making a call to is to say that racism is to Black men what patriarchy is to Black women. And we're calling for the government to address that with the same seriousness and the same urgency that they address racism with. Thank you.
patriarchy. They're then in direct contact with their abusers or the people who are actually responsible for the violence that women face daily. It's important to highlight this because it's also a reminder that the people who are perpetrators of gender-based violence are not people who are abstract. Because what we have realized, the pattern is that whenever there's issues of femicide and gender-based violence, it seems like we never know who the perpetrators are, but we always are able to identify the victims. So at this rate, at this particular point in time, in our context, we find ourselves facing our abusers at home with people who we're familiar with people who are actually supposed to be protecting us in our households, in the immediate environment. During the COVID-19, we've seen an increase in terms of the hotline that is supposed to be addressing the issues of femicide. We've also seen 11,300 confirmed cases during COVID-19. And also another important discussion that we must have is that post-COVID-19, the same people who were marginalized are going to be in a position that's worse off. GBV affects the re-entry of women back into the economy and basically affects you as an individual. So as young women, when we envision the policy responses by the government, we want ones that counter the impacts of COVID-19, but also must incorporate the gender perspective. And why do we say this? Because our social norms and cultural patterns are such an important factor when we look at the impact of any crisis on the country and in terms of how it affects women and men. There's definitely a differentiation there that we tend to ignore when we're formulating policy. So it's important that women who form part of even of civic organizations, women in the Women's League, in the Young Women's Desk, are given an opportunity to form part of those discussions when the National Command Council, for example, is formulating a response to COVID-19. Also, while developing an inclusive and resilient health system during this difficult time, we need to interrogate the gender perspective. And this is an important thing because as women, even when there isn't COVID-19, we face particular challenges where if, let's say, you need to go to the clinic for contraception, there's already a shortage. So at times where there's COVID-19 and the government tends to prioritize the health system in relation to the actual pandemic, then there's reprioritization of resources, which then continues to put women in a situation where they are second-class citizens. It puts them in a worse off position, essentially, which is something that we need to look into and interrogate. Another important factor that the government needs to take into cognizance is that they need to have a guarantee that public services for victims and survivors of GBV are effective and are not only effective only now, but moving forward. So they need to stop being so reactionary in nature, but rather plan for when we find ourselves in another crisis in future, because these things are quite unpredictable. And what we've also come to realize is that when reporting gender-based violence, as we're seen as an MDM that only responds when there's cases of sexual assault or gender-based violence, even within the ranks of the organization. Then it also creates an impression that we're complicit and we allow for such behavior and we harbor sexual violators within the ranks of the organization, which is something that we need to have an honest discussion around, especially as women who are in the MDM, because the minute you try and speak on issues of sexual violence, you ostracized and you are marginalized because you're then told that but you are in an organization where you harbor such sexual violators and perpetrators of gender-based violence. Another important thing is that the government needs to do a better job at raising awareness in terms of platforms that are made available for women when they're facing abuse in their households. For example, when we're busy with handing out food parcels and humanitarian aid, we need to look into referral booklets where we have a number or the different numbers of the hotlines that exist so that women are aware that those platforms actually exist. Because what you find is that women sit in silence and they face all of these issues because they're not aware that there's someone who can assist them and where they can reach out in order to get the necessary assistance. So this is something that we really, really need to look into. Even our education system, because remember, patriarchy is not something that just appears. You come from a particular environment, there's primary socialization that's at play, and it's not only in your homes rather, but also even in the schooling system. Is the curriculum speaking to issues of gender roles and gender-based violence? Is it actually interrogating why there's high rates of femicide? Is it only then just normalizing heteronormative standards and not even addressing issues of the LGBTQIA+ community? We need to get more involved and interrogate the existing curriculum, not just actually in schools, but also in institutions of higher learning, to ensure that we understand the importance of intersectionality and how our different identities intersect and affect one, and how a crisis such as COVID-19 can have an effect on us in terms of whatever social position we hold in society at a particular time. Most importantly, I think as much as we are dealing with a new pandemic, and it may come across as if it is a challenging exercise, it forces us to reflect and be contextualized and also always be gender responsive. And we need to put in structures and institutions in place that ensure that we don't find ourselves in the same position again. We need to ensure that we anti-reactionary and address issues affecting all the intersecting identities. As I said in the beginning of the presentation, as a young woman, I'm tired of raising the same issue year after year, protesting and not seeing any desired results or a decrease in femicide and gender. Because now I sit and I wonder, actually, could I actually be next? Will I be here next year to be able to form part of these discussions in terms of what the government can do to be gender responsive and ensure that our young women in the country and in the world in general are no longer being killed? Thank you very
much. Thanks. That was Toli Temba, a young woman against GBV. We're going to move swiftly to call a young person in basic education, Tebuho Makhafa. We ask of our panelists to speak to their 3 minutes. We are running out of time. Three.
Thank you very much. Leadership of the ANC that is led by Mamdom Vola, NITT and SG of SASCO. And I can see my principal, at the back, Principal Panyas. Thanks. Today, we're joining Progressive Youth Alliance to speak about issues that are affecting young people, especially in pre-tertiary, where we are based. COVID-19 has affected many young people and have shown inequality in our country, especially in rural areas. And Like today, young people are calling, of course, inequalities of PPEs, that there are no PPEs in their schools. But as the organization are saying that calling a shutdown, we need to come up with a strategy of saving lives in academic year. And we've been proposing to the MECs and ministers that we need to have COVID-19 educational task team, whereby we'll be dealing with issues on the ground, what is happening. And also, we can see that this issue of COVID-19, there are other political parties that want to make it a political score to deal with issues of inequality, infrastructure in our schools. And I'm happy that ANC is here. We're calling upon the ANC that they must stop going to school wearing ANC uniform, because they're giving EFF a platform to come and grandstand. And we know they're opportunistic, especially to us. And also want to say, as we are commemorating the class of 1976, we're calling our parents, MEC and Mam Nombula, that they must not drink alcohol wearing school uniform. And we know that they have a demonic agenda of proposing young people, especially our fathers who are killing our parents. When that demon has arrived, that they must propose kids, they must tell their wives to wear school uniform, leave our learners alone. They must be parents, not boyfriends. We're saying MEC and the ANC, we're pleading with you that let's not blame our government. This pandemic is the biggest enemy that we must deal with it. Because if the minister says we must go to school, it's going to hit back to the ANC, not anyone. We must stop playing games here. And also, as I wrap up, Comrade Butanan, Mam Nomvula, and everyone who's old, leave young people to breathe. Elders of ANC, they are using their powers to distort the history of young people. COSAS is in crisis because of elders of the ANC, Mam Nomvula, who are begging that 1976, a generation fought, but today we are celebrating Youth Month without Youth League. Youth League that is being led by elders who are suffocating us. And it's wrong. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Moving with speed to young people in transport, a truly young person, Comrade Vuisa Mankumba. No bad. He's young person in transport.
Chief, why are you promoting UJ? Thank you very much, SG of SASCO. Mandibulise Maqabane, Comrade Nomvula, Siabulisa, Comrade Banyaza, Deputy Chair of the ANC in the province. Siabulisa, Nizinkokheli nonke Maqabane, masinibulise ngexesha. Kuzafuneka sigawule siwarhuqa. My name is Vuisa Mankumba. I will be sharing ideas on opportunities that exist in the transport sector that young people can exploit. We will also juxtapose that with the transformation or rather lack of transformation in the sector. We are given 3 minutes, comrades, which I think is not really sufficient. But if we are unable to finish, what we'll then do is to fine-tune the presentation and publish it as an article. I think it will assist us. Comrade Zo, former chairperson of NYDA, Siyakbulisa Qabane. Comrades, the transport sector is a very huge sector that unfortunately a lot of young people are not familiar with in the country. I know that Butanani from Bizana only interacts with the transport sector through a quantum or inyat. So a lot of young people, particularly in our villages, are not privy to to the transport sector. In the main, I must say that the transport sector has a lot of opportunities for young people, particularly because without transport, there is no movement in the South African economy. So it is the heartbeat of the South African economy. It cuts across almost all sectors within the South African economy. That is why it is important that we lobby young people to find interest in the transport sector. And I think through our presentation, we'll highlight how we believe that government could assist in that regard. Comrades, there are institutional structures within the transport sector. I will move very briefly on that. There's a National Department of Transport that has a lot of agencies. So it's the National Department of Transport, it's provincial departments of transport in all 9 provinces. It also has agencies. So within the 5 modes of transport, which is rail, which is maritime, which is aviation, which is road, and there's one that is not well known, which is called pipeline. The pipeline lay ambisa gas and fuel that we don't necessarily see on a daily basis. So the agencies of the Department of Transport, I've divided them under each mode. So in rail, you would have your PRASA, you would have your rail agency regulator, you would have your Transnet that deals with ports. So there are opportunities in almost all these agencies I'm going to speak to you about. Under aviation, we've got South African Civil Aviation Authority that has opportunities. I will outline what opportunities are there. We've got airport company of South Africa called AXA under aviation. I'll move briefly, comrades. I won't mention all of them, but just for comrades to understand where the opportunities are, you can search for them at your own comfort zone. We will also have under maritime, South African Maritime Safety Authority called SAMSA. It's also under the Department of Transport. We also have so there's also Transnet. Now Transnet does not necessarily fall under the Department of Transport, even though they are an agency that deals with transport in the country. So they fall under public enterprises. So we must also highlight that distinction. Comrades, the current state of our transport infrastructure in the country, I thought let me start there, because there are a lot of opportunities there for young people. Let's start with road that everyone is quite familiar with. Only 25% of roads belonging to provincial government in the country is paved. So we only have 25% of paved roads under the ambit of provincial governments in the country that are paved. Now, there are young people in construction. Why don't we unlock this sector and give this thing to young people in construction to assist provincial governments to pave the roads? So that is one opportunity. You also have opportunities in the ports. We've got 8 ports in South Africa: Saldanha, Richards Bay. We've got Port of Ngqura in the Eastern Cape. We've got B Port, Durban Port. Durban Port, by the way, that still needs attention as well, because the reason why we moved the airport from the south of Durban to King Shaka today is because government had an intention to expand the port because there's a problem. So the port can't be utilized to its full capacity. So we're saying that project as well is not completed, and there are young people who could benefit should we unlock that and deal with that infrastructure. There's rail infrastructure. I think comrades, we were all aware that our rail infrastructure is dilapidated. We're aware that our locomotives are old, our rolling stock is old. So a lot has to happen in rail as well in terms of infrastructure, but we'll get to each mode as we move along. But I'm sure comrades, most importantly, there are nodal points that act as economic zones in transport. Now, the first nodal point would be your airports. There are opportunities at the airport. Many young people are working at the airport. There's AXA that manages 9 airports in the country. other airports are private that also have opportunities. There is stations for buses and trains. Now, young people in the country have an opportunity to design better transport infrastructure for our government. There is a problem, a mere problem of a taxi rank. If you go to a taxi rank, ungena kwicala elinye, uphuma kwakwela cala linye, and there's also no separation of an entrance for private vehicles. So xa ungena to drop an elder who can't walk into a taxi, you are getting harassed, and that is because of lack of planning for a simple thing like a rank. I mean, they are bus stops. Why can't we get young people to build the shades in the bus stop? Why must that contract be given to Van Tonder to build a bus stop? So we're saying young people must be given an opportunity where that is concerned. Comrades, I think I must mention that in terms of transport infrastructure, you know, if you build a road, let's say through some area in Venda that is a village. Now you know that in that area there's a lot of mangoes and other fruits. That gives an opportunity to Mamuchiritsi in Venda to be able to sell the mangoes to the people that would be traveling with that road. So every major transport project unlocks an opportunity for other industries to thrive. There is what we call the multiplier effect. So if you invest $1 billion in a transport project, you unlock an opportunity. Let's make an example, building of King Shaka Airport. The closest municipalities there benefited because the young people in that area then got work, then got work in the building of the airport. Now, what happens there is that you employ Vuisa, who then goes and takes care of 5 people at home, but also Vuisa goes to shop. So in there, Mr. Price, because Mr. Price, I buy a gin there at Mr. Price. Imali, Mr. Price pays the worker at Mr. Price, who also at Pick and Pay. So Imali established, but also most importantly, when you invest in transport infrastructure, you assist create jobs and there's better spending into the economy, which is most important because the more you increase jobs and there's financial flow into the economy, the GDP of the country becomes better. So we are saying to government, unlock opportunities, young people are ready. Comrades, let's move quickly to skills development. Comrades, go to ixesha liphelile my comrade. Can I just summarize in 2 minutes? Yeah, comrades, I'm told that there is only 1 minute remaining. So there's, I'm going to publish this. I think I must just do that because there's a lot in terms of skills development. Let me speak to opportunities that currently exist for young people in the transport sector, for either jobs and businesses. So we encourage that, comrades, young people in transport collaborate with other young people in different sectors. For example, young people in transport can collaborate with young people in the ICT sector. I mean, if you look at the integrated rapid public transport network that resulted in your Riavaya and Harambe in Ekurulin, there is that system that you tap there. You enter the bus. An ICT person can build that thing, but it is given to a white company we don't even know. So we're saying young people must collaborate from their different sectors and at least assist our government and not wait for government to get opportunities. I'm told, comrades, that my time is up, and let's respect the program directors. But what I will do, as I said, I will try and publish this thing either on my Facebook or in any other social media platform. Yeah, and SASCO promises to call us for at least 3 hours. Thank you very much, comrades.
Comrade Vuisa, thank you very much. We don't have much time, comrades. The president should be going in at 4:30. So we're trying to utilize the time that we have in our hands. And I'm trying to get hold of Comrade Mongegile Filani. I think she's joining us from the Eastern Cape. She is a young woman that will be speaking to us today. and represent or making a presentation as it relates to the fourth industrial revolution and your technological things that thina bantwana basenkandla esingazaziyo kahle, you know. At least they'll be able to take us through. So I hope they're here on Zoom and they can be able to join us. Comrade Filani is here. I'll leave it to her. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the program director. Unfortunately, I'm not in. Thank you so much, program director. Unfortunately, I'm not in Joburg. So I'll be sharing my presentation. I'm trying to share my presentation, but I see that I am unable to share it. Okay, without wasting any time further, let me talk about the fourth industrial revolution, because many people are viewing it as a threat to job security. They are also thinking that the fourth industrial revolution is a challenge, while it is actually an opportunity to improve the quality of life. I'm just going to be quickly to share the opportunities that are there for young people in the fourth industrial revolution. We know that young South Africans are facing a disproportional high unemployment rate of 40.3%, and versus 29% of unemployment rate at national level. So I'll be sharing the opportunities to respond to a problem of lack of skills. The comrade Stella Ndabeni has launched a program of building a capable for our army, which specifically give young people an opportunity to acquire skills, 4R skills, which are skills on data analytics, on 3D printing, on AI, which is artificial intelligence, and IoT, which is Internet of Things. We need young people with these four skills that are in demand in the fourth industrial revolution. I'm just also going to present on how can we participate on the digital economy, because the World Economic Forum has published 60% of the GDP will come from the management system. We also need people who are going to build geospatial systems in enabling the environment for e-learning. We also need young people who are going to come to government and share with us technological solutions to enable an environment for e-services, for e-commerce, and for e-governance. Young people who are interested in data analytics, Minister Stella Ndabeni will be soon publishing or recruiting young people who are interested in data science. I'm also going to talk about the disruption, because of the fourth industrial revolution. We are talking about a disruption of smart technologies, smart technologies that are disrupting the markets. So they will be disrupting the job markets, meaning new jobs will be new jobs will emerge, and other jobs will be lost. So we need to make sure that we are enhancing the capacity of young people so that they can be able to contribute meaningfully in the digital revolution. We must make sure that we reskill and upskill them. Hence, the minister is saying that she is building a capable 4R army. We need AI artificial intelligence researchers. We need entrepreneurs, market-driven entrepreneurs, who are going to make sure that we are participating in the digital economy, because any industrial revolution shifts or usher in a major shift in the economy. Hence, today we are talking about the digital economy. Young people must be the internet service providers. When ICASA is releasing a spectrum, It's not that this program is for Vodacom or MTN. We want young people who are going to occupy those space and be internet service providers. We want young people who are going to make sure that they are also in the space of electronics.
I'm not sure. It seems like we lost Comrade Filani. But comrades, we're going to continue with the program because the time is not on our hands or on our side. And we're going to call on Comrade Sfiso Mzweni as a respondent to the floor. Comrade Sfiso, you can do it where you are.
Thank you, facilitator. I'm not sure if the mics work this side. They do not. Are they working? Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Program Director. Let me greet the leadership of the African National Congress, led by the President, members of the NEC, the leadership of the ANC in Gauteng, led by the Deputy Chairperson of the province, Comrade Banyaza, the leadership of the Youth League, led by Comrade Besane and members of the NYTT, Mama Action, who's the overall program coordinator, and the leadership of the Young Women's Desk, SASCO, COSAS, and all the progressive forces that are here, our contributors to this very important debate today. I think comrades were all aware that we sit here a day before the whole country commemorates the 42 years since the 1976 student uprisings. Of course, we will not reflect much on that. I think all of the heroic acts of young people, particularly on that day, undermining the policy of Bantu education, but at the same time spotlighting to the entire world the brutality and the inhumane nature of the apartheid regime in our country. And of course, we salute the various generations of that time, the generation of 76, the generation of 1979, which saw the launch of COSAS, the generation of the 80s, which is a glorious generation that was called the Young Lions by President Oliver Tambo. In 1985, President Tambo called on the Young Lions to make South African governable and the apartheid system unworkable. And it was that generation that pushed the apartheid system to declare the state of emergency, not once, but twice, because it was that generation of young people that was able to change the course of history in our country. We celebrate and commemorate the generation of the 90s that saw the merger in the National Union of Students of South Africa, as well as South African National Student Congress, which is SANSCO, which came together to form one umbrella body of students in our country, which is called the South African Students Congress. So we truly stand on the shoulders of students. And we thought it's important, Mama Action, that we premise that on really paying tribute to the many generations of young lions that have delivered this freedom or political breakthrough that we celebrate today. And of course, our generation today, comrades,
is a generation that is faced with a youth crisis. The generation post-1994 had an enemy that was vicious, an enemy that was brutal, and an enemy that responded to in a manner in which but today, the enemy is an invisible threat, which requires a unique set of ways of executing that particular. Now, we've defined as a mission to take economic because we understood that political freedom without economic freedom is meaningless. You can never pursue a struggle for political liberties without fundamentally altering the economic system of our country in favor of the majority. The many ills and challenges that we have outlined today find their genesis in the middle of the economic disparities that continue to afflict our country. And therefore, there can never be any sober discussion that can take place without us fundamentally looking at the real question of altering the economy in the interest of our people. When you talk about unemployment, when you talk about inequalities, when you talk about gender relations in our society, when you talk about all the social ills, all those particular ills find their genesis in the economic struggle. And therefore, our inability to resolve the economic struggle becomes the one that is an albatross around our necks. And therefore, one needs to ensure that the ANC, as it addresses the issue of the youth month in our country, it must decisively deal with the issue of the economy. What COVID-19 has done, leadership of the ANC, it has shown us that the capitalist system is a crisis-driven system. And therefore, a world post-COVID-19 can no longer be a world that was there pre-COVID-19. It means we need to fundamentally alter the economy and ensure that we open spaces for the people of this country to participate. And therefore, young people must be at the receiving end of the economic liberties, because young people has been at the receiving end of the brutalities of the inequalities in our country. And I would like to conclude by mentioning three things. You know, a few days back, Mama Action, we were having a discussion with one of the pioneers of the construction industry in our country. His name is Nkuna. He's got a company called Masingita Group of Companies. Now, that company was one of the first companies to actually build malls and shopping centers in townships in the 80s. During the 80s, Black people were actually closed outside of the economic system. Now, what Nkuna did at the time, he had discovered a small piece of land. And that particular piece of land, big companies were in pursuit of that land. Companies such as Engine and Shell actually wanted to utilize that land. And when Nkuna had that title deed of that land, and both of these companies wanted to utilize that land, he came up with a system that ensured that those particular people actually invest, while at the same time he remains the owner of that particular land and a property developer that today he is. For those of you who might not know it, if you look at Giyane Mall, he owns it. If you go to Toyando, he owns the malls there. If you go to Jabulani Mall in Soweto, you go everywhere. He was a young person at that particular time. He exploited the system and ensured that, he turns the situation around. Now, the premise of this, Mama Action, is that as young people, we must never let a good crisis go to waste, because it is out of a crisis where opportunity actually emerges. Now, what are the challenges that we are faced with in this COVID-19? Is that we've got an ANC government that produces social relief programs, particularly, your social grants and so on and so on. But at the same time, we are saying the elderly must stay at home. Now, how can we then say elderly must stay at home and they must still continue to benefit out of this? One of the proposals we're making is that we must be able to launch a youth brigade, at least 100,000 young people that will be able to actually take the services of government to where our people are, so that we don't have old men and old women standing in long queues. Some of them, they actually stand in a night vigil. We must be able to unlock young people so that young people become the ones that actually goes and does that as part of the youth service that we are giving to the country. The second issue, Mama Action, I was speaking to a group of young people, very excellent. And they are saying, you know, when ShopRite began to introduce this thing called money market, they understood that, you know, young men and young women go to work in big cities. When they get there, at the end of the month, they must send money back home. That particular money normally buys groceries and so on and so on. So ShopRite was very clever to say, let's create money market in here. So when you send money through money market and people retrieve that money, they actually shop there at the same time. Now, what we are proposing is that there must be something, an app called Maoledi. I like to call Mam Nomvula Maoledi. Now, what this Maoledi app will do is that this app will allow the elderly to be able to shop online. So they'll be able to say, I need bread, I need milk, I need this and that and that and that and that. And when you as a young man or a young woman send money to your parents, that app will be able to actually do the groceries and the groceries actually get delivered to where they're staying. This is the type of innovation economy that we must be able to speak about, because any economy that emerges out of this has to be an innovation economy. As a last point, facilitate, a lot of issues have been raised around gender-based violence, and it's a very serious matter. And I agree with Comrade Precious Panda that posters, statements no longer work, because we can go out, we can shout. Many of us are even in the picket lines, but when we go back home, we face the very same situation that we are actually marching against. So something has to be done. Now, there's been hotlines that have been spoken about, people have been calling, but even those hotlines have actually not been working. Now, one of the things that we are proposing is that there needs to be a gender-based violence Uber. So there has to be an app that is actually linked to police station, that is actually linked to authorities. That does not take a lot. So every time a woman is abused, a young person is actually violated, you must be able on your phone to just press. And that must serve as some form of a panic button so that you are able to report those particular cases immediately. And this, again, is a type of an innovation that we must be able to insert as young people, because post-COVID-19, the economy, society is a new normal, and that particular new normal requires innovation. And I think that particular innovation is what we must actually implement as young people going forward. I thank you very much, Cole.
Thanks. That was please mute, Chair. Thank you. That was Comrade So, the former chair of NYTA. Moving swiftly, comrades. We will take the deputy chair, Comrade Panyaza, the MEC for Education. So we will then move. Then we will take him.
Thank you so much, comrades. Let me also acknowledge the leadership that is here and appreciate the opportunity that has been given for us to deal with issues that are within the education space. Apologies because of time. We might not cover all the issues that we want to cover. Comrades, I think the key question that you need to answer is to say, after 44 years of the June 16 uprisings, what has changed? What is it that we can claim that we have made progress in? And what is it that we can say our children have benefited out of those particular struggles? And there are two pieces of information that will guide us. The first one is the rallying call that was made during that period. education for. It stated a very important aspect that the aim of education shall be to teach young people to love their people, to love their culture, to honor human brotherhood, liberty, and peace, and that education shall be free, and that education shall be in a position to provide young people opportunities. And where we are asking ourselves whether indeed our education system is providing all the relevant needs that we have identified and that we have set in 1976. And without any fear of contradictions and fear, we'll say that no, there are areas that we've done well in terms of access, but there are areas that we still need to do better to ensure that our education system is accessible to everyone. One area that has been a contentious area that I really believe that we have not even contextualized and finalized is the issue of language. We all said, we indicated that language should not be used to exclude other people, but language should be utilized to enhance young people. But in reality, within the basic education system, only the language of the rich prospers, but the languages of the poor are overlooked. And it's very, very important, therefore, that we revisit the issue of language and ensure that this particular matter of language is a matter that all of us can say, finally, we've delivered on the mandate of ensuring that all languages are protected and that all languages are prospering. Reality is, language is the new divider. If people don't want other people coming from other communities, they will declare a certain language as a requirement. For example, in former white schools, even if you can prosper with English, if they use Afrikaans as a barometer to enter, that particular school will exclude majority of our people purely because of that language. Even if that school is at your doorstep, because you don't speak that particular language, you will be excluded. So the issue of language is very important, comrade. And I know even other people who are rich are privileged, because if the textbook is written or the question paper is written in English, the other that are privileged, they just turn it over and they read it in Afrikaans and they will understand the language. Whereas majority of our people are still being excluded out of that language issue. The second one is curriculum. We need to ensure that our curriculum responds to the needs of our people and that our curriculum can empower our people. I think many issues have been raised here. I don't want to rehash those issues about gender, but if our curriculum can't entrench gender education, there's no way that we can succeed as society. So it's very, very important, therefore, that our curriculum must incorporate the challenges that we are facing now so that it can assist us. But another issue that we want to put forth that is related to the curriculum is the issue of examination. You can't have so many examinations in one country. There's an examination of the rich through an independent examination board, and there's an education of the rest through the National Senior Certificate. But all these children that are writing these different examinations, they are going to one university. There is no university for IEB or no university for National Senior Certificate. The economy for IEB, no, there is an economy for a National Senior Certificate. To debate the need for a single examination in this country so that all our children can write one examination. Whatever that examination is an examination that must be embraced by everyone so that there must be no one that is disadvantaged on the basis of getting bursaries, on the basis of getting access to universities or other higher education institutions purely because they wrote a certain examination that was not superior. And those that they've wrote an examination that was superior are all absorbed, and the rest must just fill up the remaining spaces. It's a very important discussion that we must not shy away as a country. But the third issue is also, besides the curriculum matter, is the economy of education. Who's benefiting out of the economy of education? Whose textbooks are the ones that are utilized? Whose books are the ones that are being bought? Whose desks are the ones that are being bought? Whose chemicals are the ones that are being bought, including the chalk itself? Who manufactures that chalk? Even the blackboard of that particular chalk. And if we can't entertain the economics of education, will continue to be on the sideline of the economy of education, and our people will still fight just to build the economy, to build schools rather than be outside the most important aspect of the economy, which is the production of the issues I've just raised. But also is the kind of textbook that we had. In 1976, young people were going through Animal Farm. 44 years later, we are still studying Animal Farm in our schools. Do you want to tell me there's no brilliant African writer that can give us a book that our children can read and understand even during this particular year? Because if we don't do that, we'll continue to perpetuate the divisions, we'll continue to perpetuate the understanding that only those that are privileged, that their books must be read by our children, but those that are not privileged, their books must be an additional book that must just go to a library and read it for pleasure, not for the purpose of understanding the education system of our country. I want to conclude by saying, when we said people's education for people's power, we said the governance of education must be in the hands of our people. And you can see the behavior of school governing bodies nowadays. It's a behavior that distracts the need for us to continue with that slogan of ensuring that our people get education that will empower. Majority of SGBs are only there to retract or to delay transformation or to advance their own interests rather than to advance the interest of broader education in our sector. So as we commemorate June 16 tomorrow, we must do so knowingly that there are mistakes that have been made, and it's up to us to rectify those mistakes. But there are things that we must always ensure that we continue to do, and that is to open the doors of learning and culture for all our people, so that the education of our people can be education that can empower everyone. Long live the struggle for quality education in our lifetime. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks, comrades. We will move to call Comrade Phuti Manamela, the Deputy Minister of Higher Education, also a former Deputy President of SASCO. I don't know if they should be able to do it from there or, okay, yes. Okay, yes.
Thank you. I've just recovered it. So yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'm just going to speak broadly on some of the issues that I was told were raised earlier on in my presence, but also cover on some of the issues that I think are important in the current conjecture. I think the first thing that we should raise is the fact that what the current period has exposed, a fact which we've always known, is the fact that there are deepening inequalities amongst or within the post-school education and training sector, inequalities amongst universities, within universities and also between universities, and broadly within the higher education sector. And that although there has been significant progress done in ensuring that most of the what used to be referred to as historically Black universities, historically disadvantaged universities, although there has been progress done in investing resources and ensuring that the quality of education, the infrastructure, that the kids who goes into those universities get, that improves. We still have uneven development within the higher education system. Obviously, precisely because our institutions were built in such a way that they were meant to serve different interests. However, despite all these challenges, the challenges around infrastructure backlog, the challenges around the shortages in terms of your academic staff who have doctoral and postdoctoral qualifications, challenges around the throughput rate, besides all of those challenges, and some of the challenges around the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, which are now becoming a thing of the past, that despite all of those challenges, there's been significant progress in our view that has been made with regards to the higher education sector. I mean, if you look at what has happened or what was the case 15, 20 years ago, the entire post-school education and training sector constituted just under 500,000 participants, and that number, close to 400,000, was not representative of the demographics of our country. Today, as we speak, we have a university population of 1.2 million. More than 700,000 young people are going to TVET colleges, which have also drastically and dramatically changed from what they were about 15, 20 years ago. You have now increased participation in terms of community colleges. You also have a very unique skills program, workplace, and also institutions-based skills program with a high number of people participating there. We have more and more young people who are passing in universities. We've got more and more young people who are beneficiaries of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme. In fact, what we found out is that firstly, the majority of students in the post-school education and training sector are beneficiaries of the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, especially after the government's policy on fee-free higher education. But of course, so most students are in the NSFAS. But what we also found out is that most students who tend to progress, contrary to popular sentiment, are those who are recipients of NSFAS, meaning that they work much more harder, than all other students from the different categories. So, so the higher education and training system has got its own challenges and all of that. But what I'd like to zoom in are some of the interventions that we, have put into place in order to ensure that we respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. The first and most important one is that we announced that there would be sometime in March. All universities were guided towards a business rescue plan or a business continuity plan, wherein they had to start ensuring that they make plans for the eventual return of students. They had to make sure that certain programs, postgraduate programs, and also some of the undergraduate programs and some of the research programs do continue, and then also give some sort of support to students so that they're able to continue with remote learning, meaning learning off. So that was the first phase. The second phase was when the president announced the lockdown, the complete lockdown. And, we encouraged all universities to ensure that they are in constant touch with their students and give them the necessary support in that period. And we then started devising a plan for the return of students back to institutions, which included, the return of clinical and medical sciences students. It also included, if we then get to level 3, which is where we're at now, return of final year students, return of postgraduate students, return of students who are in far-flung areas who do not have access to data, who do not have access to connectivity, and also do not have access to, to devices. That those are some of the students who need to be accommodated with this particular return. When our minister made the announcement of all of this plan, part of the things which he included in that was the over and above the devices that have been given to students, support from the department to buy devices and data and all of that, especially targeted at NSFAS students and also students who can show that they are unable to afford all of these things. I must emphasize that all of this were emergency interventions. Students at the beginning of the year in our universities and TVET colleges applied to go and study in a contact university. And therefore, at the end of the day, they need to write an examination, sit for an examination based on the kind of mode of teaching that they had applied to. I understand that there's been a brouhaha around online learning or e-learning, wherein most of the students, rightly so, may not be or are unable to participate. And we have ensured all universities commit to catch-up programs, commit to programs, boot camps and all of that, just in case, some students haven't had an opportunity to be able to sit. So by the time all students sit for their examinations, we want to ensure that they've received the necessary support that they desire. Of course, this period means that there will be a lot of anxiety. There'll be a lot of pressure on the part of students, more so if there's no information flowing towards those students. We have seen some universities and TVET colleges reopening from last week. Most of those will be reopening in the course of this week. 33% of the students will be out of every campus. And then as the level goes down, lockdown level 2, 66% of students will then be phased back into campus. And then lockdown level 1, we return to normality. Our projection is that the slowest of all the universities and TVET colleges may complete their academic year in March or April next year. And this obviously poses a lot of challenges, but also opportunities. A lot of people are talking about, the potential to redesign our academic calendar. And maybe that's one of the things that we may as well look at. In some parts of the country, the academic year starts in September. So those are some of the things that we may have to look into, but also, the potential that this has presented for us in introducing digital support in terms of learning, not online learning, but some digital support towards students, and gradually move more and more towards, online learning, wherein students may not require to be present in a classroom and all of that. There's been, just as a final point, there's been a lot of challenges in the past with regards to the NSFAS. I think you'd recall the entire board resigned, the minister appointed an administrator, students' stipends were not paid in time. There was confusion between universities and students. Some students were declined when they legitimately should have been covered and all of that. Most of those are a thing of the past. And I think the big question that the student movement and the youth movement has placed on the agenda, which is what they want us to deal with, which we are, is what is referred to as N+2. And by N+2, what it essentially means is that if a student has 3 or 4 years to complete a degree, they are given 2 more years to, just in case they fail or anything of the sort. for them to complete, and that if they've exhausted the 2 extra years, then they will not be funded by, by any state bursary program, so that we give an opportunity to, to others. So some proclamation has been made to that effect, that this will be the last year that we're implementing the N+2 rule in the way in which it is, and that those students who are completing in their final year will be given the support. But there's no way we're going to give students more than 5 years to complete, or 6 years to complete a 3 or 4 year degree. I think it may in some instances be equal to a waste of resources, and that what we should be and will be focusing on is the kind of support that we should be giving to students whilst they are on campus, so that they are able to complete on record time. So I thought I should just highlight those issues, unless if there are specific issues or questions that were raised that I may have missed. But I hope that covers a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, comrades. Moving with speed, sawuthatha sicele i-leadership ye-African National Congress, uMama uNomvula, to come. Mama, action.
Amandla, Sanbonani, and thanks to the PYA leadership and the ANC's DIP team, young people who have pulled together this initiative. And I want to also acknowledge the National Executive Committee members who are actually viewing this. The issues that have been raised are quite important, particularly at the time when the ANC is also interacting with our own program that emanates from the last national conference. As we prepare for the National General Council, all the issues that have to do with youth development, skills development, empowerment, as well as radical economic transformation, are things that we all have to sit back, reflect on the work that has been done, but also realize the new normal that you comrades have also spoken about, that we have to now take advantage, comrades, of the crisis that we are faced with, and out of that particular crisis, exploit the silver lining that is there. And therefore, the skilling and reskilling are some of the issues that for young people we definitely have to pick up. Secondly, the issues of creating new industries and new economies becomes very important. And thirdly, the issue that Comrade Panyaza has raised around the use of language, but not just language, but also access to information becomes one of the critical issues that we definitely have to deal with. Fundamental to that are the tools of trade, the cost of data, the infrastructure in our remotest of areas for our own South African youth that are living in the rural areas as well as in the peri-urban areas and informal settlements, as to how they would then access this equal opportunity, the opportunity that will not just be for the privileged and those that are in the urban centers. Key to this, the NC is quite clear that we will not, as a movement, be capable of executing our mandate, particularly on the emancipation of young people, on the promotion of the rights, as well as creating an opportunity for the responsibilities that go with young leaders without an existing ANC Youth League. It is those bases that the ANC has put team, but of importance is that the Youth League has to exist. The SAS as well as SASCO have to exist in those areas that we all live in. But before you become a student, before you become a youth leaguer, you're also a member of a community. And therefore, under these conditions, we also have to work towards the re-establishment of a vibrant ANC Youth League, making sure that the PYA becomes a means that would do advocacy, that would also contribute, and most importantly, that can also be a voice of reason amongst young people. And it is in the hands of young people of today. Only through an organized youth formation, we can be able to deal with these issues. We want to commend the ANC Youth League, the NYTT, and other youth formations in the POA for having also been very innovative during this lockdown with the lectures that have been going on. But of importance, we also want to assign young members of the African National Congress and the Progressive Movement to, amongst others, be there in your community, pledge solidarity in action, work with your neighborhood. Let's reactivate the SGBs, the concern that Comrade Panyaza has raised. We can't have reactionary SGBs because this has been an achievement reached by the Congress of South African Students when they demanded the participation of parents, teachers, and students in the politics of our education. We definitely have to make sure, therefore, that our SGBs do not actually become a stumbling block, but they become part of finding everlasting solutions. Lastly, we need to also say, under these normal conditions that we find ourselves being able to communicate using these platforms, let's also pause and call on young men and men of our country and say, tell us what else would you want to hear from women? Let the men, real men, rise, let them stand up, and let them be amongst those who must be counted. It's actually quite worrisome that as we deal with COVID-19 as a disaster, in fact, the actual disaster now in our country is femicide, is gender-based violence, is misogyny. Unfortunately, it knows no color. We definitely have to identify this as an area of dealing with this pandemic that has befallen our country. As a united nation, we have to deal with it in a manner that makes those who tend to become victims not to be the only ones who are crying for help. Women have a right to be, and women have a right to be listened, to be loved, but let men of South Africa, and we support what Comrade Pesani said on behalf of the NYTT, let the president talk to the men of this country, and let the PYA also talk amongst yourselves, your men folk amongst the PYA. What else should it be done in a different way beyond what has been done? There's no law that can change the conduct. What else has to be done? We must also say fighting GBV must be a site of struggle that needs everybody united in our diversity, and most importantly, making sure that young South Africans do not regret having been born in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mama Action. And it is not my duty to thank everyone who has participated in today's program. I'll, however, apologize to the presidency's office and Comrade President. We started a bit late, and our program had, in fact, we had so much to talk about as young people, and that's why we believe that from here, we should go on with discussions. Discussions should not just end here, but they should go on because there's seriously a lot to talk about that affect young people. At this particular point in time, I'll allow the president of the ANC to come and speak to us. Thank you very much.
Comrades and friends, it is a great honor to speak to you on the occasion of the celebration of Youth Day in our country, where we salute the generation of young freedom fighters whose struggles and sacrifices contributed so greatly to the attainment of our freedom. We speak here of the 1976 generation who, as school children, rose up in their numbers to protest the imposition on them of the language of the oppressor, and this shook the very foundations of apartheid. These young people were impatient, they were angry, they were courageous, they were brave, and they were determined. Through their actions, they set in motion a chain of events that eventually led to the end of apartheid and the dawn of our new democracy. On this occasion, we also remember the visionaries who established the ANC Youth League in the 1940s to set a more radical path towards freedom. We remember the young people who joined Umkhonto weSizwe in their thousands at its formation, determined that the people of South Africa should not submit to the tyranny of apartheid, but should fight back with all the means within their power. We also pay tribute to the young lions of the 1980s, whose militant defiance and selfless sacrifice drove the National Party government to the brink of defeat. On this day, we salute the young people of the democratic South Africa, who over the course of 26 years have thrived and have strived to build a new society founded on justice, equality, and peace. Like the generations who came before them, these young people have worked towards the creation of a united, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, and prosperous South Africa. In doing so, the young people of today are grappling with the legacy of a past that, despite the progress that we have made in our democracy over the 26 years, continues in so many ways to determine the circumstances of the present. For young people, this is particularly a bitter legacy. Although we have achieved near universal access to basic education, many young people leave school without the skills and the experience that is necessary to find meaningful employment. And although we have massively increased enrollment in higher education and have broadened access to students who come from poor and middle-class families, we have yet to break the cycle of poverty that is passed from one generation to the next. Yet, like the generations that have come before them, young South Africans refuse to accept the constraints that the past has placed on their present. They are determined to forge a better future for themselves and their communities. They are not held back by bitterness, despair, resignation, or defeat. They are challenging the prejudice, the norms, and social rules that hinder their progress. They are showing themselves to be the agents of revolutionary change. Revolutionary change is in their DNA. Young South Africans have been leading the transformation of institutions of higher learning, have been central to the fight against gender-based violence and femicide, and have been vital in promoting behavior change to combat the spread of HIV. They are the ones who have achieved new levels of excellence in science and technology, in arts and sports, in business, and in professions. Importantly, young South Africans have been driven by a progressive political consciousness that informs the kind of society that they seek to build, but also the country that they seek and want to live in. It is a society in which there is opportunity for all, not just for some. It is a society in which the divides of race, gender, and class, and place of origin are confronted and are overcome. This year we celebrate Youth Day at a time of gross and grave anxiety and disruption. The world continues to suffer as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. Here at home, we have now entered the period of rapidly increasing infections and, sadly, more loss of life. Throughout this period, we call on young people to draw on the enormous reserve that they have, the reserve of courage, reserve of bravery, the reserve of commitment that inspired our forebears and face all the challenges head on. Gender-based violence continues to plague our country, and we've been saddened by the continuous and recurring news of men attacking and killing women in the past few weeks. And men continue to kill women in the most horrific and barbaric fashion. The women of our country feel unsafe in their homes. They do not feel safe in their workplace as well, at places of worship, and even just walking in the street. This is a totally unacceptable situation, and it must end. Young people, and in particular young men, must become even more active in the fight against gender-based violence in the light of all these barbaric and horrific attacks that are being perpetrated against the women of our country. Government is strengthening laws to provide greater protection and support for survivors and increase sentences for perpetrators. We are rolling out more sexual offenses courts and providing more training for law enforcement officers. However, these measures must be supported by a society that is willing to work together to prevent these murderous acts from taking place. The culture of silence around gender-based violence must also come to an end. Young people, when you know your friends or relatives are victims, be compassionate and listen and offer practical support and do not judge. Let victims be your guide in how to tackle their situation. Share widely information about professional support available in your community, as well as at your educational institutions. When you know your friends or relatives are perpetrators, do speak up. All too often, we stay silent until it is too late. Young South Africans are also taking up global challenges. The heinous murder of George Floyd in the United States has brought to the fore tremendous pain. It has also brought sadness and outrage, but it has also brought a renewed commitment to fight racism and injustice as it happens. Across the world, people have been united in saying Black Lives Matter. And Black lives do matter indeed. This has had some positive effects. Governments, organizations, and companies have been showing greater willingness to tackle racism and bias and prejudice in society. Racists are being confronted with greater regularity, and people are showing great unity across race, gender, class, and religious lines to fight racism. And this is to be welcomed. This is a good beginning, but much more still needs to be done. Here in our own country, we need to take a hard look at social cohesion and the all too often frequent flare-ups of incidents of racism. I commend the courage of the teenagers and young adults who spoke up about the racism they experience at schools in our own country. Let us now build on this courage and embark on a systematic program to root out racism in the education system. But we also need to root it out everywhere. This means empowering educators and learners, strengthening curricula, and broadening access for learners and students from historically disadvantaged communities to reflect a more complete picture of South African society. Fundamentally, society needs what I would call a mindset change. This will not happen without a concerted public education campaign that will help to change entrenched attitudes. Young people must become involved in the Alliance's anti-racism campaign and participate fully in all the planned activities. While campaigning against racism and gender-based violence, we must also ensure that we heed public health and safety measures to prevent the spread of the virus. Coronavirus will be with us for the foreseeable future. It has in many ways changed the world fundamentally and has forced us to adapt to new ways of living, working, and socializing. Our country must remain steadfast in our efforts to fight against the pandemic. We have had to take extraordinary measures to to delay the spread of the virus, including the closure of our borders and a nationwide lockdown. For 66 days, our economy was at a virtual standstill, and it is only in the last 2 weeks that most economic activities have been able to resume. As a result of the pandemic, our economy is expected to contract quite significantly. Public revenue will plummet, and the dire unemployment situation that we currently have in our country will worsen. This is particularly difficult on young people whose studies have been interrupted, whose businesses may need to close, who may lose jobs, and who do not have the benefit of savings or assets. Coronavirus has exacerbated the deep racial, economic, and social inequalities in our country. This virus has just laid them bare. We must ensure that our response to coronavirus and our economic recovery program puts in place a more just, equitable, and prosperous society. Young people in particular have been severely disadvantaged by the effects of the pandemic, and we need to ensure that they lead the economic and social recovery that must follow. Young people are the ones who are mostly going to lose jobs as a result of this pandemic. The 500 billion relief package that government announced several weeks ago is directed at those businesses and workers most badly affected and vulnerable households. By providing a 6-month top-up for social grant recipients and introducing a temporary special COVID-19 grant for unemployed people in our country, government has sought to put cash into the hands of the poor as quickly and as efficiently as possible. These measures, which are quite historic in their scale as well as their reach, are an immediate response to an unforeseen crisis that we are going through now. However, we will need to put in place further measures in the medium to long term to ensure that the economy is able to recover and that the jobs that have been lost in some way or fashion can be regained as soon as possible. That is why on this Youth Day, we should focus on the place and the role of young people in the reconstruction of our country after the coronavirus. Already work is being undertaken within the ANC and the Alliance to forge a new economic path that not only returns the country to growth, but which fundamentally changes the way the economy is structured and functions. An immediate task is to create employment by expanding public employment programs, by increasing investment in public infrastructure as well as services, and enabling greater job creation by the private sector. We need to put deliberate measures in place to ensure young people and youth employment are prioritized in terms of these initiatives. The Presidential Youth Employment Intervention that we announced earlier this year will play a central role in this whole effort, but it will need to be scaled up and work alongside a range of other interventions that we have in mind. Progress is being made within government to increase investment in infrastructure, with several major projects that are ready for implementation, what we call shovel-ready projects. We should also see infrastructure investment that mobilizes funding from a variety of public as well as private and multilateral sources as a significant stimulus that our economy needs right now. This pandemic has highlighted the vital importance also of the informal sector, what other people call the second economy, and of the small business sector in meeting the basic needs of our people. Our program of economic recovery needs to provide greater support to these enterprises, which provide income and employment to many people, but also to many young people. These are some of the issues on which young people need to be engaged in the next weeks and months as we put in place the building blocks and the pillars of a sustainable economic recovery. We do not want to return to where we were before coronavirus struck. We want to use this opportunity to forge a new economic path that is more inclusive, more durable, much more sustainable, and more transformative than we had before. We want to build a new economy, a new economic thrust for a new and better society. As we know from our history, the struggle for the achievement of a new society cannot progress without political conscientization, organization, and mobilization. It is therefore vital that the formations of the Progressive Youth Movement and the ANC Youth League in particular are strengthened and restored as true champions of youth empowerment and development. South Africa's youth COSAS, a strong SASCO. We need a strong progressive youth alliance capable of leading young people. As before, all these formations need to earn their position as representatives and being the champions of the interests of young people. They do need to demonstrate the militancy of those who formed the ANC Youth League in 1944, the selflessness of those who joined the ranks of MK in the early 60s. They must also demonstrate the courage of those who rose up against the imposition of Afrikaans on young people in 1976, and the political consciousness of those who led the student and the youth formations in the 1980s. So the young people of today, they have a lot of role models. They can emulate one for positions of influence, not for pursuit of factional interests or for money, but to improve the lives of young South Africans. Now, in line with the resolutions of the 54th National Conference of the ANC, this requires a far-reaching program of renewal and rebuilding within the Youth League and broader formations. But it also requires a return to the basic progressive democratic way of organization, a clear articulation of the needs and the wishes of young people, but more importantly, understanding what young people want, understanding where young people are, and also understanding where young people wish to go. Our country finds itself with a perfect opportunity to reshape our COP, will be called upon to contribute to rebuilding a stronger, more just and humane society. I wish all young South Africans a peaceful, inspirational, and happy Youth Day. I thank you.
Comrades, thank you very much to Comrade President for the moving address that he has given us. We are at, okay, I'm not even speaking.
Exactly.
My video is stopped though. All right, comrades, thank you very much to everyone who was part of this program. We would like to thank you so much as the Progressive Youth Alliance, and we hope that we're still going to have more interactions amongst ourselves as the Progressive Youth Alliance, as young people of South Africa. There are a lot of issues to talk about, and we need to be united. We need to go forward. We would like to thank the ANC and its alliance, All Progressive Youth Alliance. We would like to thank Comrade Panyaza, Comrade Puti Manamela, Comrade Tom Tsweni, comrades that we have invited to form part of the panelists of today, and everyone else that tuned in to our program today. We are very much grateful, and we would like to say that Black Lives Matter, and that women's lives, particularly in South Africa, matter. We must fight against gender-based violence, and we must stand in unity as young people, because the truth is that 80% of the women who are killed are young people. 80% of the young women who are killed are young people, and we need to make sure that at least we do something as young women. I do not think that the solution of gender-based violence is going to come to government only, but it is going to come from our society, because the issue of gender-based violence is a societal issue. It is an issue that you are going to find in churches. It is an issue that you are going to find in corporate. It's an issue that you are going to find in politics. Therefore, it becomes a societal issue, and we must be able, as the entire society, to stand up and say, we are fighting against this evil thing that is continuing to happen in South Africa. We can no longer bury our sisters. We can no longer bury our mothers. We must be united against gender-based violence and put an end on it. If needs be, the government must even consider bringing back the death sentence to those who are convicted of killing women, to those who are convicted of raping women. Together, we are strong. But if we're divided, and if we keep on prioritizing our religious caps, our political caps, then it's going to be a problem for us. The ANC-led government must be assisted by us as the society. We must come up with solutions that are going to bring about an end to gender-based violence. We must come up with solutions that are going to bring about an end in poverty that our people are deep into. We must come up with solutions that are going to give young people jobs and bring an economy that is going to be youth-centered. Thank you very much, comrades.
Till we meet again.